The autumn rain drummed against the stained glass windows of St. Three's Cathedral as 23-year-old Amelia Rose walked down the endless aisle in her grandmother's vintage wedding dress. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her shoulders like a burial shroud. The white silk gown, yellowed with age, seemed to whisper stories of past brides who had walked this same path toward uncertain futures. Her father, Robert Rose, gripped her arm with trembling fingers. His once proud construction company now balanced on the edge of bankruptcy, and today's ceremony represented their last hope for survival. The man waiting at the altar was their salvation, though Amelia had never imagined salvation could feel so much like a prison sentence. Damien Blackwood stood at the front of the cathedral like a statue carved from marble and shadow. At 35, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that made rooms fall silent when he entered. His jet-black hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit tailored to emphasize his powerful frame, and his steel-gray eyes held secrets that seemed older than his years. Despite his undeniable handsomeness, there was something unsettling about the way he watched her approach, as if she were a prize he had purchased rather than a woman he was about to marry. The wedding guests, mostly business associates and distant relatives, watched with polite indifference as Amelia took her place beside the stranger who would become her husband. She had met Damien exactly 3 times before today. Their first encounter had been in her father's office, where he had arrived like a dark angel offering salvation in exchange for her hand in marriage. Their second meeting was a stilted dinner, where he had studied her like a scientist examining a specimen. The third was yesterday's rehearsal, where he had barely spoken to her at all. As the minister began the traditional vows, Amelia found herself studying Damien's profile. There was something almost predatory in the way his jaw was set, something dangerous lurking behind those storm-colored eyes. When it came time for him to speak his vows, his voice was deep and controlled, each word delivered with precision rather than passion. But when he said, "With this ring I thee wed," there was an undertone of possession that made her shiver. The reception was held at the exclusive Grandview Country Club, where crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors. Amelia moved through the evening like a ghost, accepting congratulations from people she barely knew while her new husband conducted business conversations with his associates. She felt invisible in her own wedding, a beautiful ornament on display, but not truly part of the celebration. It was only when they were finally alone in the back of his private limousine that Damien seemed to truly see her. As the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, he poured himself a glass of aged whiskey from the built-in bar and studied her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You look terrified," he observed, his voice carrying a hint of amusement that made her bristle. "Wouldn't you be?" Amelia replied, surprised by her own boldness. "I just married a man I don't know, leaving behind everything familiar to start a life I never chose." Something flickered in his expression, possibly respect. "Fair enough. But you should know that I don't make deals I don't intend to honor completely. Your family's debt is gone. Your father's company will receive the contracts needed to rebuild. You have my word." "And what do you get in return?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Damien's eyes darkened as they traveled over her form, taking in the curve of her neck, the way her wedding dress emphasized her figure, the nervous way she twisted her new wedding ring. "I get a wife. A real wife in every sense of the word." The implication hung in the air between them like electricity before a storm. Amelia had grown up sheltered, protected by her father's old-fashioned values and her own natural shyness. At 23, she had never been with a man, had barely been kissed beyond chaste pecks on the cheek. The thought of what awaited her in the marriage bed filled her with equal parts fear and curiosity. Their destination was Damien's private jet, which would take them to his estate on a secluded Caribbean island. As they boarded the luxurious aircraft, Amelia marveled at the opulent interior with its leather seating, mahogany accents, and full-service bar. This was a world of wealth beyond her imagination, where money could buy islands, privacy, and apparently wives. During the 3-hour flight, Damien worked on his laptop while Amelia stared out at the endless expanse of ocean below. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing mile, filled with unspoken expectations and mounting tension. She found herself stealing glances at her husband, trying to read the man behind the impeccable facade. There were moments when she caught glimpses of something deeper. Softer, perhaps, but he seemed to guard those moments carefully. The island estate took Amelia's breath away. Emerald hills rolled down to pristine white beaches, and the main house was an architectural masterpiece that blended modern luxury with tropical elegance. Palm trees swayed in the warm evening breeze, and the sound of waves against the shore provided a romantic soundtrack that seemed almost mocking given the circumstances. "Welcome to Serenity Island," Damien said as they stood on the grand terrace overlooking the ocean. "It's completely private. No phones, no internet unless you specifically request it. No distractions from the outside world." The isolation should have been romantic, but instead it felt like a beautiful prison. Amelia realized that she was completely at this man's mercy, thousands of miles from anyone who might help her if she needed to escape. Their dinner was served on the terrace by invisible staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The food was exquisite, the wine aged and expensive, but Amelia could barely taste any of it. Her new husband seemed perfectly at ease, making polite conversation about the island's history and his business empire, but she could feel his eyes on her, constantly assessing, calculating as the evening progressed. The tropical air grew thick with humidity and tension. Damien had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms that spoke of physical power beneath his civilized exterior. When he smiled, which he did occasionally during their conversation, it never quite reached his eyes. "Tell me about yourself, Amelia," he said as they finished their meal. "Beyond the basic facts your father provided. What do you dream about? What do you fear?" The questions caught her off guard with their intimacy. "I used to dream about traveling," she admitted. "Seeing art museums in Paris, ancient ruins in Rome, cherry blossoms in Japan. I majored in art history, though I suppose that doesn't matter much now." "Why doesn't it matter?" She gestured around them at the opulent setting. "This isn't exactly the life of a museum curator or art teacher who says it can't be." Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "I own one of the largest private art collections in the world. Perhaps you'll find ways to put your education to use." It was the first hint that her new life might include something beyond being a decorative wife, and Amelia felt a small spark of hope. But that spark was quickly overshadowed by nervousness as Damien stood and extended his hand. "It's time," he said simply. She knew what he meant. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure had arrived. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his, surprised by the warmth and steadiness of his grip. He led her through the house to the master's suite, a spacious room dominated by a king-sized bed, draped in white linens that seemed to glow in the moonlight, streaming through floor 2's ceiling. Windows. Damien moved to pour himself another whiskey from a crystal decanter while Amelia stood frozen in the center of the room. The silence stretched between them, heavy with expectation and fear. When he finally turned to face her, his expression had changed. Gone was the polite businessman. From dinner, replaced by something much more primitive and dangerous. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice lower and rougher than before. "I've been patient today, playing the part of the civilized groom for the sake of appearances. But we're alone now, really alone, and I've been wanting you. Since the moment you walked down that aisle." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. There was something almost feral in the way he looked at her now, as if he were holding himself back by sheer force of will. "I know you're innocent," he continued, setting down his glass and taking a step closer. "I know this is all new and frightening for you, but I also know that once I touch you, really touch you, I won't be able to stop. So I need to know that you understand what you're agreeing to." She could feel the heat radiating from his body, even from several feet away. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she felt a strange warmth pooling in places that had never responded to a man before. Despite her fear, there was something about Damien's raw honesty that called to her. "I understand," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure she did. His eyes darkened to the color of storm clouds. "Do you? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine in every way that matters, and I don't share what belongs to me." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it sent an unexpected thrill through her body. For the first time in her life, someone wanted her with an intensity thought was almost overwhelming. "Then show me," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Show me what it means to be yours." Something snapped in Damien's carefully controlled demeanor. He crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing over her cheekbones with surprising gentleness. "Once I touch you," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, "I can't stop." And then his lips were on hers, and Amelia discovered that some warnings were also promises. The morning sun filtered through silk curtains, casting golden patterns across Amelia's skin as she lay wrapped in Damien's arms. The night had changed. Everything between them had begun as a marriage of convenience, had transformed into something raw and consuming, something that had awakened parts of herself she never knew existed. But as consciousness fully returned, so did the questions that daylight brought. Damien was already awake, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her blush. His dark hair was tousled from sleep and their passionate night, and there was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there during their wedding ceremony. "Good morning, wife," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep and something deeper. "Good morning, husband," she replied, still adjusting to the weight of that word on her tongue. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant crash of waves and the gentle rustle of palm trees in the morning breeze. But as romantic as the setting was, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that there were layers to Damien she hadn't yet discovered. The man who had made love to her with such passion and tenderness seemed almost like a different person from the cold businessman who had negotiated their marriage. After breakfast on the terrace, Damien excused himself for business calls, leaving Amelia free to explore the magnificent estate. The house was even more impressive in daylight, with its soaring ceilings, priceless artwork, and rooms that seemed to flow seamlessly into one another. But as she wandered through the halls, she began to notice things that seemed odd. In what appeared to be a study, she found a wall lined with monitors, all currently dark. Security cameras, she realized, though for an island this remote, it seemed like overkill. In another room, she discovered a collection of photographs that made her pause. They showed Damien with a beautiful dark-haired woman at various social events. The woman was stunning, with emerald eyes and a smile that seemed to light up every photograph. But it was the way Damien looked at her in these pictures that made Amelia's heart clench with unexpected jealousy. "That was my first wife, Isabella," Amelia spun around to find Damien standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable.
Ah!
She hadn't heard him approach, and something about his sudden appearance made her feel like she'd been caught snooping. "I didn't know you'd been married before," she said, setting down the photograph with careful hands. "It's not something I advertise." He entered the room and took the photo from her, studying it with an expression that mixed pain and something darker. "She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry. What happened?" For a moment, Damien's carefully constructed composure slipped, and Amelia saw raw anguish flash across his features. "A sailing accident. She went out alone one evening and never came back. They found her boat capsized the next morning." There was something in the way he said it that made Amelia's skin prickle with unease. It wasn't grief in his voice, but something more complex. Guilt, perhaps, or anger. "You must have loved her very much," Amelia said quietly. Damien's laugh was bitter. "Love. Yes, I suppose I did. Too much, perhaps? Isabella had a way of making you forget everything else existed. She was beautiful, charming, sophisticated. Everything a man like me should want and a wife should want." He set the photograph down and turned to face her fully. Isabella was also reckless, impulsive, and ultimately unfaithful. Our marriage was passionate but destructive. She brought out the worst in me, and I apparently brought out the worst in her. Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Damien's tone that suggested there was much more to this story than he was telling. "Is that why you chose someone like me for your second wife? Someone safe and controllable?" Damien's eyes flashed dangerously. "Is that what you think you are? Safe and controllable?" Before she could answer, He crossed the room and pulled her against him, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was fierce and possessive. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "There's nothing safe about the way you make me feel, Amelia," he said, his voice rough with desire. "And if you think you're controllable, you're more naive than I thought." The rest of the day passed in a haze of tension and desire. Damien seemed determined to prove his point about her not being controllable, challenging her at every turn, pushing her boundaries, making her respond in ways that surprised them both. But beneath the passion, Amelia sensed something else, a darkness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. That evening, as they dined by candlelight, Amelia decided to press for more information. "Tell me about your business, Damien. What exactly do you do?" "I buy companies, fix them, and sell them for profit. Sometimes I keep the ones that interest me." "Like my father's company?" "Your father's company was different. It was personal." "Personal how?" Damien was quiet for so long that Amelia thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Your father did some construction work for me several years ago. Private project. There were some complications, and he ended up owing me a considerable favor." Something in his tone made her press further. "What kind of complications? The kind that are better left in the past?" But Amelia wasn't ready to let it go. "My father is an honest man, Damien. Whatever happened, I'm sure it wasn't intentional." Damien's expression hardened. "Your father made choices, Amelia. We all did. Some of those choices had consequences." Before she could ask what he meant, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the terrace into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on immediately, casting eerie shadows across the gardens. Damien was on his feet instantly, his entire demeanor changing from relaxed dinner companion to something much more dangerous. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice sharp with authority. "What's happening?" "Probably just a power surge. The island's electrical system can be temperamental, but even as—" He said it, Amelia could see that he didn't believe his own words. There was tension in every line of his body, and his eyes scanned the darkness beyond the terrace with the alertness of a man expecting trouble. Minutes passed with only the sound of generators humming in the distance. When Damien returned, he was carrying what looked like a tablet computer. His expression was grim. "We need to go inside," he said, taking her arm with more firmness than gentleness. "Damien, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He led her quickly through the house to his study, where the wall of monitors had come to life, showing various angles of the island's perimeter. Amelia could see the beaches, the dock, the airstrip, all bathed in infrared light that made everything look ghostly and unreal. "Someone's coming," Damien said, pointing to one of the screens. Amelia squinted at the monitor and could just make out a sleek speedboat approaching the island's main dock. Her heart began to race as she realized they were no longer alone in their tropical paradise. "Who is it?" "Someone who shouldn't know how to find this place." Damien's voice was deadly calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Someone who has no business being here." He moved to a wall safe hidden behind a painting and withdrew what looked like a handgun. The sight of the weapon made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "Damien, what is this?" What aren't you telling me?" "What are you?" He turned to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, but fear for her. "I told you Isabella died in a sailing accident," he said. "That was true as far as it goes. What I didn't tell you was that there were people who wanted her dead. People who blamed her for things that went wrong in certain business deals." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. What kind of business deals? The kind where failure means more than just losing money. Damien checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. Isabella got involved with some very dangerous people, and when things went bad, she tried to drag me down with her. "So you killed her?" The question slipped out before Amelia could stop herself, and she immediately regretted it. But Damien's expression didn't change. "No," he said quietly, "but I didn't try very hard to save her either. And now the people who killed her think I know where she hid something that belongs to them." "Do you?" Damien's smile was cold and dangerous. "That's what they're here to find out." On the monitor, they could see figures moving onto the dock, spreading out with military precision. These weren't casual trespassers or lost boaters. These were professionals. "How many are there?" Amelia asked, surprised by how calm her own voice sounded. "6 that I can see, probably more. What do they want?" Damien was already moving toward a concealed door that Amelia hadn't noticed before. "They want information that Isabella supposedly gave me before she died. Financial records, account numbers, evidence of various illegal activities." "Did she give you those things?" "Isabella gave me a lot of things before she died," Damien said grimly. Information was only part of it. The hidden door led to a narrow corridor that seemed to run through the center of the house. Emergency lighting showed the way to what appeared to be a safe room, complete with communications equipment and enough supplies to last several days. "You've been through this before," Amelia observed as Damien efficiently activated various security systems. "Isabella made a lot of enemies. I learned to be prepared." As if summoned by her name, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the house. Their uninvited guests had arrived. "What do we do now?" Amelia asked. Damien pulled her close, his arms strong and reassuring around her. "Now we find out exactly how dangerous love can be." And in that moment, as gunshots echoed through their tropical paradise, Amelia realized that her arranged marriage had become something far more complicated than a business transaction. She was falling in love with a man whose past was filled with shadows. Those shadows were coming to claim them both. The safe room hummed with electronic equipment as Damien monitored their attackers through hidden cameras throughout the estate. Amelia watched her husband transform before her eyes from passionate lover to lethal predator. Every movement was calculated, every decision made with cold precision. This was a side of him she had never seen, and it both frightened and thrilled her. "They're professionals," he murmured, studying the monitors. "Ex-military by the look of their tactics. Someone spent serious money to find us. How long can we stay hidden here?" "Long enough." Damien activated a communication system and spoke in rapid, coded phrases to someone on the other end. "Help is coming, but it'll take time." Outside their sanctuary, they could hear the intruders searching the house with methodical thoroughness. Glass shattered, furniture crashed, and voices called out in languages Amelia didn't recognize. But it was the silence between the sounds that was most terrifying. "They know we're here somewhere," Damien said grimly. "The question is, how long before they find us?" As if in answer to his words, an explosion rocked the house, and the lights in their safe room flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several monitors went dark. "They're getting impatient," Amelia observed, surprising herself with her calm tone. Damien looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Most women would be hysterical by now. Most women don't find themselves married to men with mysterious pasts and deadly enemies. Despite their dire circumstances, Damien smiled. "No, they don't. Are you regretting your choice to marry me?" Amelia considered the question seriously. 24 hours ago, she had been a sheltered young woman whose biggest concern was pleasing her parents and finding her place in the world. She was hiding in a safe room while armed men hunted them. By all rights, she should be terrified, should be demanding answers, should be planning her escape. Instead, she realized she had never felt more alive. "No," she said finally. "I'm not regretting it, but I need to know the truth. All of it." Another explosion, closer this time, emphasized her words. Damien made a decision and turned to face her fully. "Isabella wasn't just my wife," he began. "She was my partner in a very lucrative but very dangerous business. We acquired and sold information, the kind that governments and corporations pay handsomely to obtain or suppress. You were spies? We were entrepreneurs in the information business. The line between the two can be thin." Amelia processed this revelation. It explained the sophisticated security, the remote location, the obvious wealth. It also explained the enemies. What went wrong? Isabella got greedy? She started playing multiple sides, selling the same information to competing parties, taking payment for jobs she never intended to complete. When her clients started comparing notes, things got ugly fast. And now they think you have whatever she was supposed to deliver? Isabella downloaded something before she died. Financial records. That could destroy some very powerful people. She hid the information somewhere, and everyone assumes she told me where. Did she? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Isabella told me many things in her final days. She was scared, desperate, trying to bargain her way out of the mess she'd created, but she never told me where she hid the information. Oh, don't you? His smile was rueful. I figured it out after she died. Isabella was many things, but she wasn't particularly creative when it came to hiding places. Before Amelia could ask where, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but the red glow cast everything in hellish shadows. On the remaining monitors, they could see their attackers moving through the house with night vision equipment. They found the power grid, Damien said. We're running on battery backup now. How long will it last? Not long enough. As if to prove his point, a new sound echoed through the house. Drilling, their pursuers had found the safe room and were working to break through the reinforced door. There's another way out, Damien said, moving to what looked like a solid wall. His fingers found hidden catches, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow tunnel. This leads to the beach. There's a boat hidden in a cave about half a mile south of the main dock. What about help? You call for backup? We'll find an empty house and assume we escaped. It's better this way. The drilling was getting louder, and sparks were beginning to show through the door. Amelia grabbed the small bag Damien handed her and followed him into the tunnel. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, and the ceiling was so low, they had to crawl on their hands and knees. Behind them, she could hear voices getting closer. Their hideout had been breached. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, sloping downward through solid rock. Amelia's knees were scraped raw, and her breathing was labored in the confined space. But Damien kept moving forward with relentless determination, occasionally pausing to listen for sounds of pursuit after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. They emerged onto a narrow ledge, hidden behind a waterfall. The sound of cascading water would mask any noise they made, but it also meant they couldn't hear if they were being followed. The boat's just below us, Damien whispered, pointing to what looked like solid rock face. There's a hidden dock behind those boulders. They climbed down carefully, the rocks slippery with spray from the waterfall. Sure enough, there was a concealed entrance to a natural cave, and inside was a sleek speedboat equipped with long-range navigation equipment. Really, we're prepared for this, Amelia said as Damien started the nearly silent electric motor. Isabella taught me to always have an escape plan. They slipped out of the cave into the moonlit Caribbean, keeping close to the rocky shoreline to avoid detection. Behind them, Serenity Island was ablaze with lights as their pursuers realized their prey had escaped. Where are we going? Amelia asked. There's another island about 20 miles south. It has an airstrip and a plane that's always ready to go. And then Damien was quiet for a moment, concentrating on navigating by moonlight with minimal instruments. Then we disappear. New identities, new lives, new everything. What about the information Isabella hid? What about clearing your name? Some fights aren't worth winning, Amelia. Sometimes survival is victory enough. But as they raced across the dark water, Amelia found herself thinking about the man she had married. The man who had shown her passion she never knew existed. The man who was willing to give up everything to keep her safe. No, she said suddenly. Know what? No, we're not running. We're not spending the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders because of something your dead wife did. Damien cut the throttle, and the boat settled into the gentle swells. Amelia, you don't understand how dangerous these people are. I understand that they killed Isabella. I understand that they're trying to kill us. I understand that you're letting fear make decisions for us. This isn't about fear. This is about survival. Is it? Amelia moved closer to him in the small boat. Or is it about the guilt you carry for not saving Isabella? About thinking you deserve to be punished for her death? Damien's face went rigid. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? You've been carrying this weight for 3 years. Punishing yourself for loving someone who betrayed you, for not being able to save someone who didn't want to be saved. Well, I'm not Isabella, Damien. I'm not going to betray you, and I'm not going to let you sacrifice our future for her mistakes. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the small space. Then Damien reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "You could have married anyone," he said quietly. "Some safe, boring man who would have given you a predictable life. Why are you choosing this? Why are you choosing me?" Amelia covered his hands with hers. "Because boring men don't make me feel alive the way you do. Because safe men don't make me want to be braver than I ever thought I could be. And because I love you, Damien Blackwood, shadows and all." The words hung in the salt air between them, more powerful than any vow they had spoken at their wedding. "I love you too," he said finally. "More than I ever loved Isabella. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Then let's finish this. Let's get that information and end it once and for all." Damien studied her face in the moonlight, seeing not the sheltered girl he had married, but the woman she had become in just 2 days of marriage. A woman who was strong enough to stand beside him, brave enough to face down their enemies, and loving enough to fight for their future. "Isabella hid the information in the most obvious place imaginable," he said finally. "In the last place anyone would think to look. Where? Her grave." As dawn broke over the Caribbean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they changed course. Instead of fleeing to safety, they were heading back toward danger. Toward the island where Isabella Blackwood was buried, toward the information that could either set them free or destroy them both. But they were no longer running alone. They were fighting together, and that made all the difference. The morning sun caught the diamonds in Amelia's wedding ring as she gripped the boat's rail. She realized that this marriage, born of necessity and desperation, had become something neither of them had expected. It had become real love, the kind worth fighting for, worth dying for. And as they raced toward their destiny, Amelia Blackwood discovered that she was no longer afraid. She was powerful. She was loved, and she was ready to claim the life that was rightfully theirs.